Okay, so welcome everyone to Denby Dale Amateur Radio Club. Delighted to see people tonight at the meeting, and very, very pleased indeed to welcome our speaker tonight, who is Tom ZT1T, who offered to give us a talk on HF beacons. And I know when we mentioned it a few weeks ago, one or two people on the call, particularly people new to amateur radio, scratched their heads wondering what an HF beacon was, and didn't even know that HF beacons, and some people who've been around many years, and that's me included, have got out of the habit of listening for HF beacons nowadays. And so when Tom offered to do that, I thought this would be a good opportunity for Tom just to talk to us about where these beacons are and how useful they are to radio hams. So Tom, you're still on mute, but I'll hand the microphone over to you and let you go. Tom, apart from being a member of Denby Dale Radio Club with Sue, is also a regular contributor to Practical Wireless here in Britain. So Tom, over to you.
Okay, first of all, how do you share this screen?
Okay, you hit the button that says share screen. That's in the bottom of your screen. If you're on a Windows computer, you've got a button with an arrow on it that says share screen. You've got a whole pile of buttons across either the bottom or top of your page there, Tom.
There. There. Is it on the top of it? Is it share?
Yeah, it says share screen. Just hit that button. And then it will give you. Have you found it?
No.
It's on the Zoom screen, so you've got a Zoom screen in front of you.
Okay. Right. Okay. We do this every time.
Indeed. And then when you hit the share screen button, you'll then see you then got an option to.
No. There we are. There. Okay. There we are. Got it.
Brilliant. Well done, Sue.
Okay, and then it's open up the.
So you have to hit share first of all. That's it.
Yeah, I've hit share. And now I've got to pull down the screen. Then that's it. Have you got it?
If you go to slideshow,
that's on the top.
On the top of the PowerPoint presentation. So you've got a menu bar across the top. If you just hit slideshow. Not there. Take the button right over to the middle. Keep going with your mouse. Keep going. You've got a button there headed slideshow, not record. The next one along, slideshow.
Oh, yeah.
Hit that one.
Okay. Yes.
And then
got
go
it.
Right over the left-hand side from the beginning. Just above that, there's a picture that says from beginning.
Oh, from beginning. Okay, there we are. There.
There you go. And you can then move it with either the arrow keys, the right arrow key, or your mouse.
Yeah, that's okay. No problem.
Okay, Tom, over to you. Over to you, Tom.
All right. Finally, we got things sorted out. Let's see how we go. Well, before I start, I'd like to thank Ross, Kilo 6 Golf Fox Kilo, for his photographs, and Glenn, Whiskey Zero Golf Juliet, for his help on my behalf. They offered previously unpublished photographs that I could use in my talk and for my RadCom article, which just came out apparently. Questions always, how do I know where I can hear DX? Or for some more fortunate operators, it's how do I know where to point my beam? But really they're the same question. All hams want to know which far off places can hear them. And this is one of the aspects of Whisper and PSK recorder and reverse beacon network and FT8 that makes it so popular. But for hams in the UK, well, working around Europe is only challenging when a rare country like Albania is activated. Those interested in DX will know there has to be propagation to that region, but how can you actually tell in real time in front of your rig? Well, I hope when you see the video at the end of this presentation, it's quite short, but you will have another way to identify in which direction propagation lies and on which HF band. Of course, one way is to scan the bands for signals and then try to call the DX station if you find one. And that's what all hams used to do. Some would monitor, some could monitor the expedition's published list of frequencies. Remember those days when before they had websites? Anyway, today several operators are glued to the cluster, and that can only show a fraction of the stations that are on the air. And sometimes, whilst I'm working a pileup, my call won't appear, and sometimes only after I've gone QRT. So it's not totally reliable, but there is what appears to me anyway, a simple method that's been around a lot longer than all the internet technical wonders. It was revolutionary in its inception and has been the biggest contribution to hams that are interested in chasing DX for over 40 years. And going back a bit, in 1972, North Californian DX, well, association it was then, but it's now a foundation. So I'll use the phrase, use the word foundation for them because it's a bit long-winded. They decided they want to expand their operation in a scientific way. They wanted to go a little bit further than assisting DX expeditions with equipment and financial support. Of course, they still do all that, but you think about it, 1972, man had landed on the moon and hams were still chasing DX the hard way. They approached their scientific advisor, Dr. Mike Villiers Jr., his call, Whiskey 6, Quebec Yankee Tango, and he was at Stanford University, and they asked him to help. Well, Mike had a friend who was working on floating maritime beacons that gave out radio signals on a project. They were using these beacons in the Arctic waters for search and rescue. And they would go in the current and they would help the search and rescue people to diagnose or, well, essentially find out how the vessels were drifting if they were in difficulty. So what's this got to do about ham radio? What's the purpose? Well, Mike arranged for one of the beacons that transmitted on 20 meters being tested in Washington, DC. Don't forget, they're in California. A group of the foundation members listened, as well as being in contact with each other on 2 meters locally. The 25-watt CW transmission was heard quite well, and even the 1 watt was copyable. So the idea was formed. Beacons running on 20 meters, 14,100 megahertz around the world could contribute to scientific knowledge and be available for any operator to use. Because there's one big snag. Each beacon cost $25,000. Now, in those days, $25,000 is equivalent to $160,000 a shot. So this was well outside the foundation's budget. Where did they go from there? Well, they turned to hams who had worked on Oscar 1 to 4. The satellites there, particularly Chuck Towns, call sign was Kilo 6, Lima Fox Hotel. Surprisingly, after a few short meetings, they came up with a unique, simple, but I think it's a brilliant idea. It would be a worldwide beacon system where each beacon transmits for 1 minute in sequence using the same message format. So W6QYT had a very clever suggestion. The last part of each beacon's transmission sequence would be lowered in 10 dB steps. So you could check the level of propagation. But then, of course, came another piece of reality. Who's going to design and build these beacons? It was at that point, K6 LFH brought in Jim Quinnett, K6OPO, and he was a designer and builder and part of Project Oscar. Some of the older hams will probably remember. Well, it's all very well to have the project mapped out, but there was one obvious immediate hurdle placed in the way of operation. They needed a license from the FCC. Fortunately, Mr. Frost Walker W4BW, and he was head of the amateur section of the FCC, helped them and encouraged them, and even introduced them to people who were giving presentations at Walk 79. And I must admit that the foundation has certainly recognized Mr. Price Walker's contribution as fundamental. Anyway, during the submissions to the FCC, the foundation had to give undertaking that the prototype of the beacon in California would be monitored 24 hours a day, and they would supply all the names to the FCC so that those persons were detailed to listen. Now, you've got to remember that unattended remote operation was a long way away. Now, this is the first one. The prototype operational in 1979, a trailer overlooking Stanford University. The calls went out for hams, mainly through magazines, to send in reports of the signals heard, and the uptake was very good. As this was before the internet, remember, reports were faxed or sent through the good old postal system. We need to remember one thing, that this was the time when QSL cards were the only method for confirming contacts, and the postal system worked. Well, after 2 years of operation from California, the foundation were ready for potential beacon operators in other parts of the world. The recruitment of Dave Leeson, Whiskey 6, Hotel Sierra, designs were finalized and production started on the other 9 needed. This slide of the equipment shown by Mike Stahl, K6NYC. He was part of KLM antennas in those days, and I talked to Mike quite often on 40 meters long path. Anyway, interesting, the TS120 transceivers operated 24/7 for over 10 years on the 20-meter band before replacement. Well, and here's the antenna. It's an ordinary standard quarter wave vertical. Well, almost immediately, Dr. Max Hensler, HB9RS of the UN, Marty Lane, OH2BH, and other prominent ham radio operators managed to find locations in their country or organizations. And the beacon message has gone out on 14,100 megahertz since the 1980s. Here's the map of all the beacons. This was done by Sue, and it's one of her specialities of being able to produce lots of things for publication as well. But before the story moves on, I have to mention that during RTTY contests, operators interfere with the beacon frequency. And although it's been part of the IARU band, and it's against every country's regulation, even regular messages on the cluster to desist have been ignored. It's just so dreadfully inconsiderate. Anyway, back to the plot. In 1984, the Secretary of Region 2 IARU, Alberto Chayo, that's Hotel Kilo 3 Delta Echo Uniform, recognized how successful the 20-meter project was, and he proposed a new worldwide beacon system. The Walk bands had been awarded to hams in Walk 79, and the new name was North Californian DX Foundation / International Amateur Radio Union International Beacon Project. Now there's a mouthful for you. So we'll just call it the Beacon Project. The next big step forward was that beacons would not only operate on a time sharing, but on a band orientated schedule. Of course, the big question was, once again, who would design and who would build the new beacons? And never mind the difficulty of synchronization aspect on shorter transmissions to fit in with all the new beacons. Well, they threw this idea around until about 1988. I think that's what I wrote. Yeah, 1988. And this is when Bob Fabry, N6EK, he was a retired professor of computer science at the University of California. Is it Berkeley or Berkeley? I'm never certain. But he got involved with W6QHS, and they worked to develop a system as it is today. There was a discussion about the time duration, and how long you would be listening to the beacons, and considering the reception period of each signal was far-sighted, really, because if you think about it, when you're listening, if it's CW, I'm not a CW operator, but once it's gone in my head anyway. Now, considering the reception period, the NX, the foundation rather, and the executive committee of the IARU accepted a 12-second message. But Bob thought differently because he'd worked on different timings, and he said that a 10-second signal would be the ideal one. And as it worked out, he's quite correct. Now you can see the locations on the map. So what happened was Ken Wood donated 16 TS-450s in those days to the new multi-band project. And each, there was a plaque commemorating Jim Rafferty N6RJ. He was a silent key in June 1933. Now everybody would know at that time Jim Rafferty was Mr. Radio Shack, and he supported their project. Distribution of the new beacons ran from late 1995 to September 1996. Basically, each beacon signal is the same. Call sign, 100 watts at 22 words a minute, and that's a bit variable, by the way, if you've got a computer. Then it gave out 4 DARs of 1 second in descending power, 100 watts, 10 watts, 1 watt, and 0.1 watt. And I'll remind you of that sequence later before we have the video. So what were these new frequencies? They were, as you can see, 18110, 21150, 24930, and 28.200 megahertz, of course. And after cycling through the bands, 20 meters to 10 meters, there's a silence period. It took some time for this easily accessible system to be up and running completely, but it's still the best now system for checking one aspect operators cannot do without, and that's propagation, whilst you were sitting at your radio. Of course, the reverse beacon network may overtake this, and eventually anyway, but more operators will have to be prepared to leave equipment running unattended. Fortunately for present-day hams, most computer login programs have a facility that allows operators to do this. And the first one is concentrating on a particular band. As you can see, all the beacons are up there. And the main changes in the, yes, that's right. This means a change in the azimuth from one beacon to the next. But of course, it's not always a simple requirement. Many operators have directional antennas like V-beams, and would probably be listening on a particular spread of bearings, or they have an omnidirectional antenna system available. Well, the second system is operating on a specific area, just one beacon. And you probably notice it's in blue, and that means I picked that time when that beacon was operating, as you can see on the sidebar there, with the time and the frequency. But of course, it's easily done with CAT, as most computers, most shacks have a computer in them anyway. And those 2 slides are from Logger 32. Now, for dedicated listening, I'd suggest Pharos by VE3NEA, if it's very popular, and the the URL at the top would give you most of the information you need for that. And of course, it's in several login programs. So anybody who wants to copy that down, or they can get it later. With the upturning propagation, the facility enabled me to have a SCED and contacts with Yankee Bravo 4 Bravo Echo, Foxtrot Echo, sorry. Freddie won't be very happy. Anyway, Freddie and I talked on email, and I said to him, well, listen for the ZS beacon on 17 meters, and I would listen for the Victor Radio 2 beacon. That's the one in Hong Kong, obviously. When propagation was good, I heard the beacon, and I emailed him, and we had our SCED. That was on 17. The following day, listening for the beacons on 12 meters, with the beam pointing northeast, I got called by Victor Oscar 1, Foxtrot Oscar Golf. You've probably heard Larry a few times. He's very loud down here as well. Eventually, with him pointing to Europe and me pointing north, we had a catch-up. And by that stage, the Victor Ranger 2 beacon was coming in very strong. And an email later, I had a 12-meter QSO with Yankee Bravo 4, Foxtrot Echo, with pleasantries, of course, and good reports. Because I'm very lucky I can monitor 2 bands and have filters, and this avoids killing the other radio, so to speak. Now, we all know, we discussed this earlier, we all know propagation goes in cycles, so I'd like to remind you of the words of John Troster, that's Whiskey 6, India, Sierra, Quebec. He was actively involved in the project, and the following was written in 1994, quite a way, and it was in the 1997 of the CQ Almanac. And what he wrote was this: "We're grateful to the universities, national societies, and individuals who have volunteered to operate the beacons during the increase in HF activity as the sunspot cycle passes through its minimum and begins to climb it back to DX glory." Now, before showing the video, I'd like to tell you how I came by the photographs. It'll also give you a chance to copy the frequencies from the slide that Sue's showing. Sorry, the call sign. Yes, the call sign's there. Okay, where did we get to? After I finished writing the talk, I emailed Glenn, Secretary of the Foundation, to ask if there was a photograph of the original. And I believe Glenn is the longest serving director and member of the foundation these days. So he passed it on to Ross, G6, Golf, Fox, Juliet, and he's the foundation's historian. Imagine my surprise the next day, the very next day, I got photographs, and as Ross wrote, "Thank goodness I labeled the photos on my hard drive." The date of capture was September 1987, and he and Ron, Whiskey 6 Victor Golf, had made a site visit, and these photographs can now be seen on the Foundation's website. I have lots of examples of beacons there in the aftermath of some of the disasters. Now, all ham radios are invited to support the continuing work of the North California DX Foundation, and you can find further contact details on their website. What does the promised video show is a question some of you may ask. Well, I hope it demonstrates how easy it is for you to know where propagation in the HF band is. Now, at the risk of repetition, I want to remind you the DARs at the end go first 100 watts, then 10 watts, then 1 watt, and finally 1/10 of a watt. And that'll give you an audio picture of the strength of propagation, but only at that time. These were beacons on the 10-meter band in the afternoon of the 30th of March, 2022. This was the day when Nick confirmed this talk. Now, what the demo should show is, if you can hear it, you can work it. You might see the times in the box on the right. I do need to apologize beforehand for the movement of the camera. We don't have a big tripod, and the camera actually is the size of a packet of fags. If anyone wants to run a second time, feel free to ask. And regarding the colors of the beacons, blue shows when the beacon is active on that band. So now Sue will run the video. We hope.
Tom, we've got no audio. Have you got audio playing on your video?
Yes.
Right. I'm just going to put the record on pause for a second, and I'll explain to you what to do. See it?
Have you got sound now?
We have. We can hear some noise in the background. Yeah. All we can hear is some noise, Sue. We can't hear any stations.
Just listen, it will come.
Okay.
Right, well, before I finish, I'd like to say three things. The first is that if anyone wants a particular slide put up again, because you were unable to copy it, please let me know. Secondly, and most importantly, I'd like to thank Sue for the artwork, the logical sequence of the slides and the video. And finally, thank you for watching and listening. And as Bugs Bunny would say, that's all, folks. Back to you, Nick.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tom. And thank you very much, Sue, for all your work there. And yeah, we did hear you eventually. The signals came up for those stations, which is brilliant on 10 meters. Okay, so if I just knock off the sharing for a minute and we'll go back to the room. I'm sure we've got some people on the call tonight that we've got some questions to ask. So can we go back into the room and see who would like to ask a question?
They're stunned.
Anyone got a question to Tom or Sue?
No.
Why not on 40 and 80 meters? Maybe that's a stupid question, but anyway.
No, it's not a stupid question. It's a very sensible question. This project only has 20 to 10.
Okay.
There are plenty of other beacons, as you know, on all the other bands. I mean, a good example is this is out of Practical Wireless. They've got all the 50 megahertz beacons on it, and there are many, many, many on 10 meters. But these were the first. And also countries have 40 meters. And I think I seem to see that there's a 40 megahertz beacon running in a few countries as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean 40 meters, 7 megahertz and 3.5 megahertz.
Yes, but 7 megahertz is running, but there are some 40 meter as well, 40 megahertz beacons.
Yeah, true, yeah. Yeah, that's the 8 meter band or something, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Anyone else for the question? Yes, Henry. Henry, we got no audio from you, Henry. Still got no audio. No, I think the problem is your microphone, your end, not the.
Can I ask a question in the meantime?
Yes, go ahead.
This is all, beacons is all new to me. What kind of frequencies, what sort of pattern of timings do they transmit over? How often would I find one on one of those frequencies?
All the time. But 24/7, all the time. But if you monitor one beacon, there's a gap because they do 10 seconds to each band, and then there's a silence period.
In which case, thank you very much. I should be adding them to the list of the easily tuned stations to have a listen.
Yep.
Right, Henry, do you want to try again?
Yep, sorry about that. Thanks for the talk there, Tom. On your Logger 32 image there, you showed all of the beacons together. How did you achieve that? When I clicked it on, I only got one beacon at a time, or one station, one call sign at a time.
Well, you've got the window, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you click one side, you get frequency. If you click the other side of the table at the top, in the window at the top, you get one beacon.
Mm-hmm.
So you one on this on the what did we get to? Oh, yeah. Basically, there are two
right.
windows at the top of the numbers and the time, and the
Right.
left one gives you the the right one gives you the frequency, and the left one gives you the beacon.
Thank you. Sorted. Thanks.
There you go. That was simple, Henry. Right. Anyone else with a question to Tom?
Yeah, Nick, I'd just like to say thanks very much, Tom, because it's not a subject that I knew anything about. So it's been very interesting for me, and it's something that I'll use in the future.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, down here, you see, we're such a long way away from everything. It works out very well for us. And of course, you know, when you point in that direction, you can get different beacons. Like, for instance, I can get short path stateside and then long path stateside on 20 meters during the one day. So it's, you know, but I've got directional antennas. If you've got directional antennas, it really works well.
Very good.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Anyone else with a question to Tom? Can I chuck a question out to people? Has there anyone else here on the screen ever used HF beacons as something to go and have a look at to see what propagation's like?
Yes, I do.
Yep. So I think, as Ian said, that's something for him to go and have a look at, and you as well, Andrew, and me too. I mean, Tom, you made the point that, of course, you know, people who use FT8 or Whisper are effectively getting an idea of where their transmissions could possibly be received by. But of course, the difference is that FT8 and Whisper is picking up signals well below the noise level. And what you're listening to on your radio there is a real radio listening on that frequency, hearing a signal that's coming in over the noise. And therefore, if you were looking to make a contact on CW or sideband, then you're much more likely to make one with someone you can actually hear on the radio on your receiver that you're using with the antenna you're using than you would do, for example. So if I went on FT8 now and made a contact with someone in Australia, I might be very pleased with it, but I might actually have no chance whatsoever of making a contact on CW or sideband with Australia at the moment, because the difference in the signal strength is enormous, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it's a now system.
Yeah, it's now. It's a real. That is a real radio signal that you are picking up from a transmitter and an antenna, and that noise, the Morse code that you're hearing, is coming into you above whatever the noise level is at your end. So whatever the band noise is, whatever the RF noise is like, that is showing you whether or not propagation is possible between you and Argentina, or you and New York, or wherever the beacon may be actually located. And I think that's, as you were saying, Tom, that's the exciting thing about using beacons. And when I know Ken, are you still on frequency, Ken, out in Spain? But I know, Ken, you make a lot of use of beacons on VHF. You're always, are you still there, Ken? His video's there, but he's probably gone off to make himself a brew. Ken, on VHF, and VHF operators in this country use beacons an awful lot on VHF in order to see if there is propagation into, for example, France and Germany and Spain and so on, if there's a bit of a lift we think is taking place. And Ken regularly posts messages on the Denby Dale Facebook page when he hears up beacons coming up from France or Germany. He says, oh, I've just heard, you know, a very loud signal coming up of the beacon in Belgium on 2 meters. You know, propagation is going to be good for us. It's got a bit of a lift on 2 meters, and it's exactly the same thing, isn't it, Tom? The VHF beacons are very simple, exactly the same concept as the HF beacons, just on different frequencies.
Well, I was at the Cape Town Radio Club 2 weeks ago. I was helping out with the RAE exams, the practical side. And one of the guys who's organizing there, he listens to a 10-meter beacon. He's a 10-meter fanatic, a 10-meter beacon in Wales on 28220. So they're all over the place. But, you know, if they're not there, you don't have propagation. You may as well take up golf or something.
I don't think you can hit a golf ball that far, Tom.
There we are. Anyway, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, Tom, can we show our thanks to Tom for his presentation tonight? That was very good, and thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also record our thanks to Sue for the lovely graphics on that presentation, Sue. You did a really good job there. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, we got it.
Okay, I'm going to turn the recording off, but thank Tom, and we'll look out for those articles in RadCom, and we'll look out for the your next article in Practical Wireless as well, Tom. And so thank you tonight for that.
Thank you. Yep, it's already out in RadCom, by the way. Cheers.
Okay, cheers, Tom.
Cheers.